Hi everyone, welcome to On the Other Hand. I'm Ariane Zurcher, and today I'm going to be demonstrating a whipped woven circle. I'm going to be demonstrating it with both left-handed and right-handed. This is also the stitch that is used within a traditional Dorset button. It's a little bit different for the Dorset button because you have a hard ring, so you can't slide your needle under two of the spokes at a time the way you can on fabric. However, if you are struggling with the whipped woven while doing a traditional Dorset button, and I'm going to put the Dorset button video in the upper right hand corner that I've done, if you're struggling on making that traditional whipped woven center, I suggest that you practice on fabric. It will be very helpful. So I'm going to show it both left-handed and right-handed. I did another video about a year ago, and a couple of people said that they found it hard to follow because after a couple of times I sped it up. So there will be no speeding up. The video hopefully will be helpful and you'll be able to follow along whether you're right-handed or left-handed. So come on with me and let's do a whipped woven circle. There are two ways of starting your whipped woven circle. The first way is to have one of these circle templates, and you place it where you want using your chalk or a lead pencil, depending on the color of your fabric. You then make your circle. You can then divide it into even or odd number of spokes, marking your center, and that's going to be what you use to guide you for your whipped woven. The other way of making your circle is using Sue Spargo's Spoke Easy. There's some great things about this. The first is that it goes from anywhere from 5 spokes to 10. And you have your center, which you can then mark, and then you can mark the ends of each of the spokes and use that as your guide. The downside is about using these is that the thickness requires that you extend your chalk quite far, and so the chalk often breaks quite easily. Not so much with a lead pencil. It fits fine and you can usually, but if you don't want a lead pencil, I don't typically care because, as is the case here, you can see my points and my middle are getting completely covered. The same with this one. Again, I did this in lead. It doesn't matter. Now, the downside to this, other than the thickness, is that you're limited to 10 spokes and you're limited to this size. This is the size circle, but most of us aren't doing a circle that's much larger than this. Those are the kind of the pros and cons. I also have found, and I haven't gotten it yet, but when I do, I'll do a video on it. It's a round, a large round circle that's divided up, and you hit the center, and then you can turn it and measure exactly how far apart, and then that way, using that device, you would be able to do as many spokes and as large a circle as you wanted. So I'll see how that works when I get it. I just ordered it. I'm going to start with this one, and with this one I'm using the Steph Francis texture selection. I love these texture selections because you get 5 different threads and you get to play with them and see which ones you like. So you have a viscose ribbon, which is this one, which is hollow and you can actually fill it. You have a cotton chenille, a pearl cotton, a metallic, and then this one, which I'm not sure what it is, but it's like a pearl cotton, but I think it might be I don't know, it's shiny versus the more matte of the pearl cotton. So I'm going ahead and I used the cotton chenille for my spokes, and then I whipped the spokes using the pearl cotton, which is number 3. Then I'm going to show you how to do all of this right-handed, and I did that here, so that you can see the different ways that you can use and do a whipped woven. These both are using the center, so I go from spoke to center, and this one is not piercing the center, it's just going across, and you'll see what I mean by that during the demonstration. Okay, so there I have it. You can very faintly see my marks in the lead, right? And that's what I'm going to use as my guide. So I'm going to thread up a thread, something that I like. I love experimenting with these different threads. You can make the spokes in a different thread. And the thing is that when you make the spokes, you can think about the weight thread that you want to make those spokes, because if your thread is much thicker, your spoke is going to be much thicker, right? When you wrap around it, it's going to be thicker. If I use this chenille for my spoke, it's going to give a very different look than if I use an 8-weight thread. So it's just something to think about. And then, of course, what I wrap it with is also going to create something different. So just for fun, why don't I use this chenille? It's a cotton chenille, and I'm just going to cut off a length. I'm going to thread up a 18 chenille needle. It's not a wrap stitch, so I use a chenille. Now the thing about this thread is that it has pile on it, so it is a little bit challenging to use. Often I'll use a 15 Milners with it because the eye is much bigger. With this, I'm just going to leave just a tiny bit of tail there. I'm not even going to try to do a quilter's knot. The more I push this thread through something else, the more ragged it's going to get. I've got a fairly long length. It may or may not work. And I'm going to start right dead center. Let's see. I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to go into my center. And there's center. I'm going to come out for my second spoke. I don't want to pull this, but I also don't want it to be loopy, so I'm just being aware of that. Go back in to center, come back out for my third spoke. Go back into center, come back out for my fourth spoke. The center is going to get a lot of play here, so that's why I didn't want to have my knot also in the center. Go back into center. Come out for, let's see, okay, so there you go. That's what happens, right? It's okay. We're just going to clip this. I think I'll switch to a 15 Milners. It's going to be easier to thread. It's also going to make a bigger hole in my fabric, which is fine. It gives me more room to pass the chenille through, so it won't fray as much, hopefully. Go back down into center. Come back out. My little dot is. back down into center, come back out with my little dot. Go back down into center. And I keep sort of making sure that this isn't pulling anywhere. I can also look at the back. The back gives me a lot of information. If I see that this stitch, any of these stitches are pulling, I can adjust and tweak them so that they're no longer doing that. I don't want them to pull. It's a fine balance, making sure that they don't pull, but also making sure that you don't have them flopping around either. And I'm going to go back into center for my final spoke. So there it is. I'm now going to go ahead and I'm going to pick a different thread to wrap around my spokes. If I want to, I can leave these legs showing. I can just decide to do a tiny little center, or I can add all the way around, or I can go all the way to the very edge. Each one creates a little bit of a different look. So I'm going to go ahead and end my chenille here. If you don't like tying knots, you can try to just wrap it around the existing threads. I don't have any layers to hide my thread through, so I'm not going to bother doing that. Okay, so that's that. Now I think it would be fun. I could do it with a solid color now, but I think it would be fun to continue using this and just pick a different thread. And maybe I pick the metallic thread. I could pick the metallic. It would either be one of these. I'm not going to do the viscous ribbon. It's going to be totally different if I did that. You certainly can. But I think I might, maybe I'll just do the cotton. Okay. For this one, I can go ahead and do the chenille. You could also do a tapestry needle if you want. The tapestry needle has a blunted tip, and it makes, if you're doing something that's weaving, like we are with this, or a woven picot, for instance, a needle bar, woven needle bar, any of those stitches, you can use a tapestry needle. I tend to just go with a chenille, but it's really up to you. Now I'm going to come in as close as I can to the center. And I'm going to pull my thread up. Now I'm going to start doing this I'm going to do this left-handed, and then I'll show this done in right-handed as well later. So I am up between this spoke and this one. I'm going to go back under this one, right? I'm coming up right here. So I'm going back under this one. And then I'm going to go under the one in front. And what's going to happen is I'm wrapping each of these legs individually. So now I'm between these two. I'm going to go back to this leg, and I'm going to go under the next one. I hold my thumb here to make sure that I'm getting close to center as I can. My thread is now between this leg and this one. So I'm going to go back under this leg, right? And I'm going to go in front of this one. And here's my thread right? It's right between this and this. So I go back under this, and I go forward under this. I call it one step back, two steps forward. So one step back, two steps forward. And in this way, I'm wrapping each of these spokes individually as I go around the circle. Hence the name whipped woven circle. Whipped woven circle. Okay. Now I'm in between this one and this one. So I go under this one, and then back under this one, and then forward under the next one. Now, if you're right-handed, you're going to do exactly the same thing, but instead of going counterclockwise, you're going to be moving clockwise. There is no difference otherwise. Go back under this leg, forward under this leg. So wherever I'm coming up in the spokes, I go back under the one that where the thread is emerging, right? So the thread is emerging here. I'm going to go back under this one, and I'm going to go forward under the one just in front of it. Now, what's going to happen as I go close, as I come out farther and farther away from the center, is the distance between the spokes becomes greater. And that's when I start to become aware of how much I'm pulling. Because if I start to pull, I'm going to start twisting those legs so that they look like a pinwheel, which is fine if that's what you want. But if you don't want that, and then you're wondering why your legs are twisting around, well, that's it. So whatever you decide to do is fine, but it's good to be able to choose that you want it that way rather than just sort of happen and not know how to fix it if you didn't want it that way. So back one, forward two. And I keep adjusting my fabric. So my thread is coming here. I'm going to go back under this one, and I'm going to go forward under the one directly in front. The other thing I do is I can tweak these wraps and push them closer to the center if I feel like they're really kind of far away. This is pretty good. Here's my center, but these are a little bit pushed, so I might take my needle and I'll show you how I do that. So here's my thread coming up. I'm going to go back under this one, right? Because my thread's right here. So I go back under this one and I come forward under this one. If I want to push those threads, I just take my needle and I kind of push it towards center. I do keep my thumb here to make sure that I'm getting those nice and tight. I like having them pretty tight together. These are all things that you can decide you like or don't like. You can make them so that they're not so tight around each one of these spokes. You can make them so they're looser. You can make them, you can stop. You can add a different color. They're all different things that you can do. And it will change the way these look. As I said before, when you choose what thread you're going to use for your spokes, you just want to keep in mind that if I was using an 8-weight thread for my spokes, these spokes would be much thinner because I'd be wrapping around a very thin thread. I chose a pretty thick round thread, so I'm getting meatier, fatter looking spokes. Kind of fun, isn't it? I love these colors. I do love the colors of Steph Francis threads. They're just beautiful. So as you can see, the distance from here to here is getting larger as the wraps proceed out, emanate out from the center. I don't know how much more I'm going to do. I kind of like leaving the legs showing a little bit because they're so fun and furry looking. So I may stop soon. Okay, so I think I'm going to do one more round and then I'll stop. And what I'm doing as I come farther away is I'm just making sure that these legs aren't getting pulled, and because that's what I've chosen. If you want that pinwheel where they are getting pulled and they're sort of doing this, that's fine. But I don't want that. So if it was starting to do that, I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't, there are times when I do want that, and that's fine. So as I said, I'm just making sure that these legs are getting wrapped, but I'm not pulling this. I'm not pulling the thread. I'm allowing the thread to lay flat against the fabric as it emanates out. And I think I'm going to do 2 more legs, and then I'm going to stop, and I'll show you how I do that. There's that one. And I think I started with this one. So I'm going to pull that one. And then I'm going to wrap around, and I'm going to end it right there. So my needle is going down underneath this leg. Now, if I wanted, I could bring this up, and instead of ending it under the leg there, I could end it right here under this leg. And sometimes if I see that it looks like it needs to go under there, then I'll do that. That's it. And I'm going to end my thread. I can hide the thread under the fabric because the whipped woven is covering that, and there it is. I'm going to do this again for right-handed people from start to finish. Okay, so let's say I want to do my spokes in one color, and then I'm going to do my whipped woven in another color. So I have this color that I used on the other one. I'm going to come up on the outside. I'm not going to pierce the center. I'm going to go across, and then I'm going to come over to the next spoke nearby, and I'm going to come across. I'm going to pull this through. Now I want this to be, I don't want it to be loose, but I don't want it to distort the fabric either. So I just have to be kind of aware of how much I'm pulling. I'm going to go down. I'm going to go over to the next spoke. And the next one is here. And then the last one is right here. Okay. So what I've got is spokes. They all meet in this center, but there is no definitive center where I'm poking my needle down. I'm going to end this, and I'm now going to do my whipped woven using a different thread. So you can see just what that looks like. It's kind of fun to play around. You can play around with thread types. You can, use a pearl cotton for the spokes, and then use a ribbon for the spokes, and then use a pearl cotton for the whipped woven part, or vice versa. You can play with all different kinds of threads. You don't have to always use the same thread. It's fun to experiment and try different threads. Okay, so this is a 5-weight number 9 pearl cotton, and if this is a 5-weight, then what I've been using is a 3-weight. So because this is definitely smaller than that. So what I do is I come in as close to center again, and I marked my center, so I should be able to see it if I pull these guys apart. It's right there. That's my center. So I'm going to come in with my new thread, and I'm doing this right-handed. So I've come in here, and now I'm going to go back under here, and I'm going to come forward here. So I'm going to go back down under this one because my thread is here. I'm going to go back down under here, and I'm going to come forward under this one. I'm going to try to keep these as close to the center as I can, but I don't want to push them too far. I want to make sure that they're pretty close to the center. I'm going to go back down under this one and come forward under this one. So back down 1 and forward 2. Go back down 1 and come forward under 2. Go back down under this one and come forward under this one, and then 2. Go back down under this one and forward under these 2. Now the trickiest part about this is making sure that these little guys, these wraps, are as close as you can to center. But because you don't have that center, the spokes emanating from the center, it can be a little tricky to get these as close as you could if it was pierced at the center, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to keep kind of tweaking. So I've gone 1 complete round, and now I'm starting to go the second round. And I'm going to keep going around like this as long as I want to. So I stopped in from the edge. I might continue and go all the way out. I don't think so, though. I sort of like having the wool and this little bit of leg showing. Showed a little bit of leg there and a little bit more here. I hope this was helpful and it went slow enough that those of you who've been having trouble with it were able to finally really see and maybe even stitch along with me as I was doing it. I always think it's helpful to be able to stitch and watch and then hit the video, the pause button, and then start again, back up if I have to. But hopefully I did this enough times that you were able to follow along and get it, because once you get it, that's it, you're done. And then, as I said, this is exactly the same process for doing a Dorset button, a traditional Dorset button, where you're weaving in, and the only difference is you're stabbing in and coming out. Thanks so much for watching, and as I said, I hope this was helpful. Until next time, here's to stitching together.